Hey guys, this is week 22 of my series titled 52 Weeks of Reaper. Every week for 52 weeks, I'll be releasing a new video focusing on a key feature in Reaper. So let's jump right in. So for this week, we will be talking about the MCP, or the Mixer Control Panel. So first off, to view that, we will go to View, the View menu up top right here. Click and you see where it says Mixer here. And if you notice over here, we have a keyboard shortcut of Control M. So we can just click select that feature, or we can hit Control M on the keyboard to show and or hide the MCP or the mixer. So if we notice here, we have a master track. The master track looks a little bit different from the other tracks. And if we click on this little icon right here, we will get a menu that is specific to the master track. We can just double click in this blank area to create a new track. This will be your regular tracks. And if we right click in this blank area, we have contextual right click menus. So what that means is, depending on where your mouse pointer is, when you right click, you may get a different menu. So in here, we get this menu, which is the same as this menu if we click that little eye icon on the master track. And if we right click in this border area of the master track, we will get this same right click menu, which we'll look at in a second. But if we right click in the meter area of the master track, we will get different options. So just be aware that it is very context dependent. Depending on where you click, you will get a different menu type. So if you right click on an actual regular channel, you will get, once again, a different menu, and we'll go into that in a minute. So let's just examine how these tracks are laid out. So from top to bottom on both tracks, they're very similar. We have this section right here is where you would drop in your effects. So you would click here, you will get this window to open up, your plugin browser window for you to browse, search, and load plugin effects. Or you can hit Control F to bring that up, search, and then drag and drop your plugin over here, and then the plugin would open up. Let's undo that for now. Then we have our send section, which we're going to talk about in more detail later on. So in this video, I'm just going to touch on the basics of the MCP. Last week, we talked about the TCP. In next week's video, I'm going to go in more details where I'm talking about the MCP and the TCP and how some of the information that I'm going to talk about crosses over. So I didn't want to do some of the stuff today because it's kind of redundant. So in next week's video, when I address both sections, I can just talk about the different features and more advanced options that correlates to both the MCP and the TCP. So this video today should be very short in comparison, and it will be very basic. So once you have one track created, I would advise you to just right click on that track, and then you have the option to insert another track. We see the option here for Control T to insert a new track, but we also have an option right here for you to insert multiple tracks. So you can select that, and we can say we have 8 here, and you can actually put a name in, but we'll go deeper into that next week. So let's say we select OK. We now have 8 tracks created right away. So when selecting a track in the mixer, we get selection indication by the highlighted areas up top and also down at the bottom. Also this little dot. So that's indicating that that track is selected. So if I held Control and clicked on track 8, then track 6, then track 4, we see that those 3 tracks are highlighted by this indication down here and that little dot, and also up here. And that'll be a little bit more apparent when we look at colors. So let's say we wanted to select a group of tracks. I can say select on this one and then hold shift and then move down to track 4, select that. So now we have all 4 of these selected. And at this point we have a temporary grouping. So if I move the fader, they will all move together. If I hit solo, it'll solo together. Mute. If I wanted to change the inputs, I can come here and go to input 2, and now they're all reading input 2. Let's switch that back. If I move the pan with all of them selected, the pan will move. So as far as the track controls are concerned, we have input for audio, we have input for MIDI, we have our pan, we have mute, solo, we have our routing options for sends and receives, we have an effect button. If you hit the top part that says effect, it will open up your effect browser for you to choose and load effects. And if you load an effect, once that happens, let's say we have this effect here, and let's load a second one by clicking up here. I'm gonna load a re-EQ. So now we have 2 effects loaded up here on track 1. So now when we hit this power button, it will bypass the entire effect chain. And that's indicated by this going yellow up here. And when it is active, they will look like this. So also, you guys notice I am using the Reaper 7 default theme to demonstrate these interface features and preferences. And also with an effect chain or effects on that plugin, if you hit the FX part of the button, you will get the plugin chain that will open up with those effects that are in that plugin chain for the respective channel. Then we have the pretty standard things of the fader. We have the track envelope automation modes. There is a phase button where you can reverse the phase. And if we have all these tracks selected, which puts it in a temporary group mode, all of these will respond together. Mute, solo, and so on. And if we want, when we have this in a temporary group mode, if we want to adjust something outside of the group, we can hold shift and we will get a temporary bypass. And now I can adjust these separately. Once I release shift, if I go back to move it with these still selected, they will go back to reacting as a group, and the movement now will be relative to their position. So any setting on a mixer, if you want to reset it back to default, double click it, double click it, double click it, double click it. If we had another group selection, let's say these 2 are pulled down and the pan is set here. If I double click, it will reset both of them together because they're in temporary group mode. So to reset any setting back to default, double click on that setting. For solo and mute, we can swipe select across the tracks to enable mute or solo quickly. So you can do that to enable or disable the mute or the solo. Just click and swipe. So I can just click and swipe over these 3, and I can click and swipe. To undo that, click and swipe, and click and swipe. Let's say we had a couple of things soloed. Sometimes you have a big project where you're not seeing everything, and sometimes you just want to unsolo everything quickly. You can just control click and it would unsolo everything that is soloed. Same thing with the mute. If we had a couple of things muted here and here and here, and let's imagine that this mixer was really full and we can't see all the tracks, and we just want to unmute everything in one shot. You just hold control and click on one of the muted channels and it will automatically unmute everything. So that's also good to know. So there's a feature where you can audition some of your settings. So if you're moving something like, let's say, the volume knob, and you want to test out a new level while the music is playing, you can hold Alt and you can pull down the volume knob. And let's say we want to hear what it sounds like at -12. We can hold it there, and if we don't like it, we just let go of the mouse and it goes back to where it was before. So let's say we had it at around -5 and we held Alt and pulled this down to -21, and then we're like, we don't like that. You can just let go of the mouse and it'll go back to what it was before, which is -5.33. If we pull it down while holding Alt and we like that, then you just release the Alt button first, and now it's gonna stay at -20. But also remember, we still have Control-Z to undo. Now, when you want a more fine-tuned granular control, you can hold Control and then move that parameter, and you'll require more input from the mouse to get that parameter to move, which will give you more fine-tuned control to get more smaller increments of movement and change in that parameter. So that works for your fader, it works for this pan knob here, and it works for any plugins also. So let's get into some of the visual options in the MCP. So I can open this plugin right here, just click on it and right click on the top bar. There's an option here that says show embedded UI in the MCP. We talked about this last week for the TCP. There's also the option to do it in the mixer. So we select this option and now we have a visual representation of that plugin right here that we can actually interact with and we can actually pull down. So if I click and pin this, I can move the threshold here and you see the threshold setting being changed on the actual plugin itself. If I hold Shift and drag down, I'm now changing the wet amount. So we can also do that for this EQ. Like I showed last week, you're gonna right click on the top bar, go to show embedded UI in MCP, and now we get a visual representation of the EQ. And I can grab this parameter and start to move it. And if you notice, the parameters are moving in both the tiny representation and on the actual plugin itself. This option is only available for JS plugins, so Reaper's native plugins. This will not work with third-party plugins, VST plugins, clap plugins. That's not going to work. Only with the JS plugins, which are for the most part Reaper default plugins. And there are also some third-party JS plugins available in the Reaper repositories that will give you visual feedback and visual control depending on how it's coded and the type of plugin it is. Also, another cool thing is that we can, I can right-click in a blank area and I can say show effect parameter when size permits, and we see another row of controls here. And what I could do, I'm going to show you this on a third-party plugin. So with these sections, you can hover to where you see this little line, your icon changes to that arrow, and you can change the view. So I can pull down to see more of the parameter section and open up some more slots for effects. And that only resized just one track, but if I hold control, it'll start to resize all the tracks together. Same thing right here. If we want to see more of the fader and the controls, We just hover over the top until we see our pointer change into this icon. We can click and readjust the height for just one. Then I click Control while I'm doing that, and now it's resizing the height of all the tracks uniformly. So now that we have this resized this way and this way, I'm going to add another plugin here. Let's go to a third-party plugin. Let's see a clap one. Clear this out. And let's add sunburnt. So with sunburnt, I'm gonna move this parameter that says dry and then go up to the parameter button up here on the plugin. And right here it says last touched, dry. And I'm gonna select show in track controls. And like I showed last week in the TCP, it's pretty much the same thing. We now have control for the dry option in this plugin right over here in the mixer panel. And if I move it, you see the dry signal is moving. And you get some visual numbers here of what we're changing. And the tooltip shows you that it's the sunburnt dry parameter that we are affecting. So we can actually close sunburnt and just dial in the wet dry signal right here. And if you click on this, it will open that plugin back up. And you can keep adding more parameters in any plugin right here on that track. So it doesn't matter if it's a third party or if it is a default JS plugin, this feature is available for all plugins. Just make sure that you right click and you have that option to show effect parameters when size permits checked off, and you'll have this extra column. If not, if you don't want to see it, you can hide it. And also when it is showing, if you want, you can right click on it. You have some options to show the envelope, which will show up on your arrangement screen. You can go to modulate to modulate it with demodulator and Reaper, modulate it with an audio signal from the channel that it's on or from side-chained audio signal from another channel. Or you can even link it to another MIDI parameter. Once again, in that right-click menu, you have aliasing options. So you hit that and you can give it a name that will make more sense to you. And that'll change the name that's displayed here. And you can also remove from list. To remove it from list, you can also Alt and click to remove it. With any plugin, if you want to remove it in the mixer, you can just Alt click to remove. Alt click, remove. Alt click to remove. This is the sends area right here. I can actually drag from the routing button to this track over here. So I'm now sending from 1 to 9. And now we have a send option, and it'll show you that you are sending to track 9. And you can now click on this knob and drag up to increase or drag down to decrease. And you see you get visual representation of the levels that you are sending. And once again, you can hide that whole panel by right clicking in a blank area over here and go to show sends. When size permits, we uncheck that and we will no longer see the sends here in the MCP. We're going to talk about more visibility options in the next video because it kind of correlates with both the MCP and the TCP. So we'll save that for next week. I think the final thing that I have to discuss for this video is there is an option to show tracks in multiple rows. Where is it? Right here. Show multiple rows of tracks when size permits. So let's say we had a ton of tracks and then we resized the mixer to something very small. If you notice now we have 2 rows of tracks. Let me zoom out so you can see that. So we have 2 rows of tracks. I personally don't like this, but the option is here. Looks a little messy. but we have 2 rows of tracks. And if you make it smaller, it can even turn into 3 rows. You have 3 rows of mixer tracks. And if you make it small enough, these faders actually turn into knobs. We can keep adding. I'm just double clicking in the blank spots, and we have tons of mixer tracks in rows. You could turn that option off if you want, but the option is there for you to have multiple rows of mixer tracks. So that's pretty much it for the video, guys. Next week, we're gonna get into way more advanced features dealing with the visual layout and the preferences and just some of the options and how to kind of navigate and move around between the MCP and the TCP. But I had to do these 2 videos to get you guys up to speed before we get to the more advanced options, features, and preferences. So check back for that video next week. Thanks for watching. And as always, you'll see me in the next video.